And now, coming to you from the Light Studios in Grand Prairie, Texas. Won't you come on over here and sit down? Got to talk to you.
What's up, dudes and dudettes? Welcome to the HotnCole podcast. Today I get to chat with my brother, literally my brother, Clay Humphreys. Clay is a doctor, lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. We get to talk about life in the military and being away from home. Enjoy.
How many of these were acquired since
These
you
are all
started?
mine.
Yeah,
You mean the
all the stuff, like all your memorabilia.
all the decor is mine?
Let me get used to this right here.
Yeah,
I can hear myself.
I can hear myself talk.
I'm sorry that you have to hear me.
Are you on drugs right now? You're saying
I don't think I'm allowed to comment on that since I'm active duty military.
I can hear myself think, man. Yeah, that's actually why I wanted to bring it up here is because, man. So the last episode I did, I cut it out. It said Matt Foster says as I'm setting up, he goes, "Oh yeah, I want to tell you." He's like, he's ex-military guy, and so all his friends are military, and his vets they call it. And so he said they were like, "Why are you on a podcast with Mo posters in the back?" And I've got 1, 2, 3. I got 4 Mo posters in here, and he made it sound like it was a surprise that Matt would be on a show with Mo posters on there. So that made me happy that somebody recognized the Mo posters.
So I'm laughing right now because I don't know what Mo is.
Right.
That's your brother.
That's well, and that's part of what made me so excited that somebody knew who Mo was.
Oh, so I'm not weird for not knowing that.
Well, you're weird, but
Not for that reason.
Not for that reason. Mo's a jam band. I mean, have you heard of the Grateful Dead?
Yes.
You've heard of them.
Yeah, I don't know much about them.
You heard the name Jerry Garcia?
No, the name.
Yeah, they're just old, they call them deadheads. But anyway, Mo's kind of like them. They're very much just kind of jam band. They play 20-minute songs. Their albums aren't as long because they're studio recorded and they need to fit within a time frame, but their live shows. See, all these concerts are from live shows, by the way.
So I see MOE.
Yeah, with a period. Yeah. So behind you, and all of them have the tickets with them too. So behind you was New Orleans. 3 nights in a row we watched Mo. The one over here was in Jamaica, and that was 4 nights. And see the band.
They play for 4 nights?
Oh yeah. And see the hand band on top? On the top of the poster have that like line that goes across there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a wrist thing.
Oh, yeah.
Bracelet.
So you can go back every.
So you can go back every night. Mo, this was the one in Dallas, first time in 8 years. That was with Blues Traveler, and that was really good. And then this one was Vegas. So I don't know if you've met my friend Josh.
I think I
Kazook.
have, but there's a few of your friends that I think once I see them, I can put the face with the name.
Mostly Josh, Justin, and Clayton. We've traveled. Matter of fact, we have one in Asheville. We saw them in Asheville, North Carolina. And
Mo?
Yeah, and we didn't all together, and I didn't get a poster or anything.
Clayton, Justin Hudzik.
Yep.
So
You knew Kim Hudzik probably.
yeah,
Hey, real fast.
yeah.
I always say this. Justin Hudzik, HU. How many HU friends do you know?
Hughes.
Hughes. Well, okay, so Levi Hughes,
Okay.
Justin Hudzik, Chase Hoteri is HU.
Oh, he has a U.
Yeah.
Ha.
And then we had a friend of ours. She was actually a year older than us and got held back, or she graduated late. Jennifer Wazar, HUI. I mean, it was crazy. We had like 6 or 7 HUs in our class.
You don't pay attention to the teacher till they get to the H's, and you're like, okay, I'm paying attention now.
Yeah, right.
Okay, still not me.
Yeah.
No.
And I only really noticed that via graduation.
Right.
when
Can
you're
I
all
please get
sitting
this
ne-
over?
Well, you're all sitting next to each other, and you're like, oh yeah, we're all HUs. So, by the way, I'm using all this, so
What's all this?
we're officially potting, casting our pods, casting our.
That's gotta be, like, I'm sure we can figure out something and make a lot of money off of casting our pods.
Ooh, pods. I think of frogs. No, what if frogs? They sit on lily pads.
Lily pads, lily pods.
Lily pods. You're my brother.
Yeah. Now let me ask everybody who might potentially be listening, because this is interesting. Who is older?
God, it's so messed up, bro. You just enjoy asking that because you know the answer. You know what they're gonna guess the wrong answer to make you feel younger.
Well, I look up to my councilman brother. You know.
Yeah. You look up to your older councilman brother.
Well, for the purpose of this podcast, I'm not going to say whether he's my older or younger councilman brother, but I do look up to him physically, mentally,
Physically.
emotionally.
Yeah. Well, I look down to my
Not going to say.
lieutenant colonel doctor brother. You know, it's funny. I'm like shy of the titles, right? Like, I mention them on the podcast because it's important to the context of the conversation, right? But I'm always like real weird about that when somebody's like, "Hey, you're the councilman." I'm like, whatever, you know. It's a strange thing. It's a strange phenom. One of my guests, Misty, is a psychological therapist, and she kind of tried to break me down on some of that stuff. It was kind of funny.
Did I see a? So I've missed. I don't have your last two. Maybe.
By the way,
two or
thanks for
three.
being two of my seven followers, because you and my niece Kaylin.
Yeah, it's really funny because we'll be eating cereal, and she's like, "I want to watch Uncle Cole." Okay.
Pull them up, put it on the iPad.
Yeah. Well, I use my phone,
Yeah.
but it's also one of the reasons why I haven't seen a couple of yours.
Right. Yeah. Man, it's so tough because I want the fluent,
Yeah.
casual conversation. And sometimes I'm just like, screw it. Hey, man, she's going to grow up someday, right?
She is.
But she's only like 4.
Yeah. This is the age where they will say the words and not know what they're saying.
Oh, yeah. Judd Taylor and Amanda Taylor, who lived with me with Harper.
Yeah.
One day we're just sitting there eating dinner, and Harper goes, "Oh," and we go, and of course Harper at this point is like 3 or 4 years old. We're like, all right, no more cussing. You just can't. She didn't know what she was saying. It was just what mom said or dad said. Pretty good. Man, I try to sometimes brag about you to folks because the titles sound pretty cool. Lieutenant Colonel, Doctor. Now, and here's the deal, especially when you watch from Lieutenant to Captain, Major, you're like, whoa, you keep going up. It's like, so Lieutenant Colonel is I kind of have my own personal desires for you to be a colonel, a full-blown bird, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is significant about Lieutenant Colonel? I mean,
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this would be only my perspective. When you become active duty, you typically go through some type of officer training school or some type of training, and your first commander is lieutenant colonel.
oh, really?
Yeah, and so actually, when you go through
I didn't know
training,
that.
yeah, so when you go through training, actually, it's like the captains that are kind of in charge of you, and so they're kind of like God, right?
The captains.
Yeah. And so you're like, oh man.
And let me. So this is officer training. Like when you come in with a degree, you're going to be an officer and you're doing your basic training to get into the military, whatever. In this particular instance, Air Force.
Right. Yeah. So they bring a bunch of you in, and actually an overwhelming majority of them are prior enlisted. And in fact, one guy ended up being a good friend of mine. He was a prior enlisted master sergeant. So when you're a young 22-year-old guy who's never, doesn't know anything about the military, and you go to this officer training school thing, and you're like, man, I don't know what's going on. Like, this is kind of weird and fun. I mean, actually, there's some elements of fun.
Yeah.
There's an adventure to it.
Well, I think at year one to enjoy the process and what you said, adventure. You said adventure.
Yeah. So this is my problem right here. Is like, I could tell some really long stories. So it's a matter of whether or not you're falling asleep. So just tell me if you get bored. But I remember actually, so I want to say I graduated from A&M, let's say May 10th, May 11th.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I'd already decided I was going to the military and Air Force. And the recruiter came back to me and said, hey, you can start May 25th or August 16th. And of course I went through that process of like, well, maybe I should take a summer and do, whatever. But I got back and kind of thought about it. I was like, this is an adventure.
Yeah.
I didn't see it as going to a job that I'd be working at for the next 40 years. I saw it as this sort of temporary thing. So why wait, right? Like,
yeah, it's like, corporate entities. I know this is a little bit different, but Camp Thurman in Pantego, they take kids out there, especially during the summer. But I think they're in the regular hours. They take like corporate teams out there to do this like adventure obstacle course kind of thing where it's like a week of like bonding and getting together. And it's like, so you could look at basic training as like this opportunity to challenge yourself and achieve. Too bad you got to sign up for another 20 years after you do that.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I saw it. I mean, I didn't see it as, going into the workforce for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
It's, I feel like I've lived a pretty good adventurous life. There's plenty of things I haven't done, but there's lots that I did. So I wasn't like, oh no, it's lost forever. Now I will tell you, it wasn't 20 years, but when you're 22 and you just spent 4 years going through college, a 4-year sign up to the military is like your life's going to be over before 4 years comes. Right?
Time is funny that way.
It really is.
I'm learning that in the last few years, how it's like, man, it only takes a year to do that. Okay, I'm in. Like a year's nothing.
Yeah. So anyway, man, we went off on a lot of tracks there, but I think I was ready to go in. And so, hey, let's go. Let's go do this adventure. And so you show up there.
Wait, what brought you to go to there? I mean, what?
I've never talked to you about that, have I?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of things, but yeah.
Yeah. So, this is kind of how I tell the story.
Yeah.
Is you can correct me if you see this any different, but I don't remember growing up much of a military influence.
No. I mean,
So I would say once I began thinking about it, I could now identify people like Jerry Poteet.
Yeah, for sure.
He was a reserve.
I had a feeling you were going to mention Jerry Poteet.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not as though he, was like a military guy up on the pulpit, but I do remember he actually had a promotion ceremony one time in front of the church.
Did he? Okay.
And nor did I know that he was a reserve chaplain.
Yeah.
But there was some influence there. Uncle
Real
Carl,
fast, Jerry Poteet was a longtime pastor at First Baptist Church in Grand Prairie, was a retired Air Force guy. He's a reserve chaplain. And until recently, he was taking military vets' stories and recording them. Like he would just go to these vets and just record any story that they wanted to tell. It's a pretty interesting thing. Go ahead.
That's pretty cool.
That's Jerry for you, too.
It is. Oh, and by the way, I did invite him. He commissioned me.
Yeah, okay, I remember that.
Yeah.
I knew that.
Which was totally cool. I mean, I was afraid to ask, and yet at the same time, I think he was like excited about it.
Oh yeah.
So Jerry Poteet's one. Uncle Carl. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I don't. Actually, I went by his house today. I had a chance to ask. I don't really know much about that, but I know he spent some time enlisted. And then another one is Robert Glazner.
Yeah.
Remember Glazner?
Dude, I have popped into First Baptist Church for different reasons. The new one on 161.
Yeah.
And I always see Dave and Joe
Really?
Glazner. And I'm the first couple times they're always like, "Hey, Clay." I'm like, "No."
That's my
And
younger
they're
brother.
like, "I know." They kind of know, but they don't know. They kind of say, and now they know it's me. I've done it enough times. So I always tell them to tell Robert hello. That's it. That's all. I didn't know that about Robert, but that's really good. Robert had influence on me. I mean, going up there to the Family Life Center all the time. He was very normal, right? He wasn't like, "You need to do good, young man," or "Here, come here, let me talk to you about something." He was just a dude that like cared about us and gave us a hard time. And
Yeah.
I try to reflect Robert when I work with the kids at Calvary. Like that's my kind of motivation.
We should be able to tell him that. I'm sure that'd be awesome.
Well, I
for
tell
you.
Dave and Joe that every time I see him. Make sure you know. Tell Robert. I think he's Lieutenant Colonel.
He should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
He actually contacted me. So, this goes back a ways now, but I was at National Reconnaissance Office in D.C. He had just moved to the D.C. area and contacted me, but literally, I think
couldn't
within a
make it.
couple of months we were gone. And he has, for the most part, probably at this point, grown kids. He was Lieutenant Colonel at the time. I'm assuming still a reserve chaplain, but maybe he was spending a lot more time active.
I mean, I'm 38, and I was probably between 12 and 15 at the peak of being there. I mean, being there at the Family Life Center, and probably a little bit less than that because I quit going. Maybe it was even younger. Anyway, let's say 12. So 26 years ago was probably the last time I've seen him, you know, there at the Family Life Center.
And by the way, I think he's reserve, but I think he's full-time reserve, and he may even be active. And that's to try to understand that. I don't think I fully understand it. Anyway, so those are the influences, right? But those are the things that you begin to reflect on. So now I'm down at Texas A&M, and what are all these dudes walking around?
Core.
Yeah, like what is this? And because I didn't I think you've often said I was headed to UT, right?
That was the trajectory.
I was the trajectory.
Hook 'em horns.
I was driving down, I-35 southbound.
Ah, little Patty Green boy.
35. I don't know if he was southbound 35 by the time I was going down there or not, but
90, yeah.
I don't know. 97.
Yeah.
And this bright light shone from the east.
That's it.
And like a firefly.
Hey, man, are you on drugs? This bright light beamed up, and then I went, man. That makes a lot of sense that you followed the bright light in the sky. Are you going to give us a yell, by the way?
Probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
True allegiance here. Like you're known for your yells.
I think that there was a time when I was there that I was like, I wanted to lead yells.
Lead yell. I'm sure, man. They're like making out with the chicks and
Right.
in front of everybody.
I did actually try to get one of my friends to run. I said, I'll be your campaign manager to do it.
Is that what it was elected till?
It was. It was often core guys, but that's because, well, number one, it's cool that they are.
Yeah.
But they often voted as a block, right?
Wow.
So it's almost like a Republican primary convention, right?
Sure.
Figure out who you want to run. Now they get all the core votes.
Yeah, I get it.
And it makes a lot of sense. And they are the keepers of the tradition.
Sure.
So it makes sense.
So not just some knucklehead that wants to
Yeah.
get involved like you.
Yeah.
But
Which is why I would have lost.
right. So A&M.
So I'm down there, and so I don't have any history on A&M, right? I don't know it. So even when I see core guys, I'm like, what in the world,
Yeah.
So now I'm doing aerospace engineering courses. That's another good story. If you
Whoa.
Whoa. Yeah.
What does that even mean, man?
So why did I do aerospace engineering? So, for me,
So I'll say let me throw this in there and then you respond. So you've always been very studious, at least dedicated to making the grades that for whatever motivation you had or reason you had.
Dad would ground me if I got B's.
If you got B's.
I don't know about you.
I would be, a B would be celebrated in my situation.
So he realized how much he screwed me up by
Yeah.
making me so fearful of bees.
Yeah. I will say they did have a pretty unique ability to adjust, right? When you go from the kid that makes all A's to the kid that gets kicked out of school, right? I mean, and not on their fault. I mean, they just so aerospace engineering was the choice, huh? You touched on this with me before. Go ahead.
Maybe so, but I applied to a few schools, got accepted to A&M, and I wouldn't even plan on going there. And
I do remember getting one of your applications wet on the coffee table and really like pissing you off.
that must have been the UT one. And why?
That's why.
I actually can't remember if I got accepted to UT. I'm assuming I would have, but I don't know. Or maybe that's why I ended up at A&M. So that was a bad joke on all my Aggies. Sorry about that.
That's why I didn't say anything. That's your Aggies.
So then I get a letter in the mail later on saying, "Hey, you've been accepted to A&M. What school do you want to go to?" And it was just the weirdest question to me, right? Like, A&M. So it turns out there's like a school of engineering, a school of business, a school of-
Agricultural mechanics. I know. Yeah. Okay. So then school, individual.
So I'm like, I don't know, right? So I start asking around, and people are like, "Well, if you're like math, or you think you're good at math, you should do engineering."
There we go.
And as it turns out, aerospace starts with the letter A, and that's the first letter in the alphabet. And now I'm sitting in aerospace engineering courses.
Yeah, you told me that.
So as it turns out, when you're,
Hey, by the way, did you have college credit going into college?
I did not. I took the AP classes, failed the exams.
Really?
Well, failed. I didn't score enough to do whatever to get.
It's crazy. Because kids now, even like the normal dudes, have college credit going into college. It's crazy. And they're just preparing them earlier, I guess, or they're finding out the qualification.
Maybe so. I like to say that I figured out how to get through school, not necessarily that I was the brightest.
Nice.
So,
I can see
have
that.
you ever heard of the Enneagram?
We talked about that on one of our podcasts recently.
Did you?
Yeah. I'm a
Okay, I'll have to
two.
watch that. You're a two?
Yeah.
I
Misty.
would have said so.
Misty Diaz, the second Misty Diaz, we got into the Enneagram a little bit.
Okay. So I haven't gotten deep into it, but Katie and I have talked about it for numerous reasons, and I've determined that I'm a 3.
Well, you determined that, or did you take the test and it told you?
Both.
Okay.
But
So you took the test and it told you, then you.
I don't remember. So we've looked at it over numerous years, so I forgot what the test said. I've read a few books. So,
cool. Wow.
So the Enneagram, they're really big about not having somebody else tell you what you are. You're supposed to.
Okay.
It's supposed to be self-discovery.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's like Enneagram, Fight Club rules, like in the sense that you don't tell somebody else what they are. So you're supposed to go through the self-discovery. And I think what I often say is I identify most with the 3.
Welcome to 2020. I undoubtedly am a 2. However, I like most things. I think that's, let's say, 80% of who I am. I mean, I hate this. This is who you are, and because it's simply not true. And there's so many. I've read up a couple pages worth of stuff on 2s, and it's pretty accurate. I mean, it's who I am. But then on the same note, I'm like, this is BS. Like, I also, whatever. It's all situational. I mean, we react differently to different things all the time. But I can see how that becomes like a core of who you are for whatever reason.
Well, I think one of the things I think is important to remember about any type of personality test. And by the way, Enneagram doesn't claim to be a personality test. They claim to be something.
And am I a 2 at 4 years old?
Well, so now you can get some Enneagram people talk about do you born?
Become your number? Are you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a debate within the Enneagram,
Like
world.
being a middle child that seeks attention would want me to do things for other people, right? And that's what number 2s do, right? So if I was an older child, so through being a middle child, I became a pleaser to get attention, right? Like, anyway.
Well, there's a debate within the Enneagram community whether you're born with it and now life takes you down that path, or whether you're not born with it and life experiences draw you into
form you into it. Yeah.
But nonetheless,
Which is probably a larger debate I mean, not just
throughout
Enneagram,
everything.
that's everything.
Yeah. Which I think is what's important to also is and this is in a lot of things, to not get caught up into which model and recognize that it's a model, right? And so these are, whether it be Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or the many others that are out there, there's positives and negatives in all of them. But the point is it's kind of self-discovery, right? It's the more you understand yourself, the better you're going to interact with.
Well, that's a good point about being healthy and not just like because I got sick. I'm talking about healthy, like mentally, physically, spiritually, understanding how you are and how you work is important to doing all that.
So get this. This is something that surprised the heck out of me. So I know we're going down lots of rabbit trails, but I think it's all going to come back a little bit. We were talking about being a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. One of the things that they do, they have these things called professional military education, and they have one for captains, majors, and lieutenant colonels. And Air War College, as they call it for lieutenant colonels, is one where, they're training you for senior leadership. And one of the things I found interesting is so first of all, if you get chosen to go in residence, which means you actually physically go to the school, it's a year-long school.
Wow.
So on one hand, you can be like, that's ridiculous. On the other hand, you could be like, well, these are our military leaders, and we want to train them appropriately to be warriors, right? And to lead in national defense and stuff. So one of the blocks in there is on senior leadership in particular, and it gets down into actually that you actually take a personality test.
Okay.
And
So even in the high-end military training, you're doing some type of personality test.
yeah, in fact, this was the only one that I have done in the military as a part of our professional military education.
Wow.
But why do I say that? Because I find it interesting that in trying to prepare, guys who have been in the Air Force for 16 years to be senior leaders, they say that we want to take time to do a personality exam so that you better understand your strengths and weaknesses. And what's more is actually there's a lot of talk, research papers and stuff like that about the importance of reflection. So I actually took this when I was deployed a few summers ago.
To Jordan, right?
Jordan,
For what,
yeah.
6 months?
6 months.
So you're in the military for 12 years, 13 years, and they finally, I guess to get some type of command experience, deployment experience, they sent you to Jordan for.
I don't know if that's the reason. I think backing up, I think it's because first of all, you go all the way back to September 11, 2001. We entered war, and I'm an engineer. They didn't have a need for engineers.
Yeah.
And I could have volunteered, and I couldn't go. In fact, when you're young and single, you want to, but they had no use for you.
Boy, you graduated college in May that year.
Yep.
And you went to the military right before that, right?
Yeah. So
I totally never thought about that.
Yeah. So this is what's interesting. So everybody has their 9/11 story, right? But which is so cool, right? We all have our
I
kind
love
of where
it,
we
yeah.
are. But do you remember I'm turned around, but the Navy base down here?
Yeah. Well, we still have. It's still
there? Okay.
It's still there's a reserve, Army Reserve, I think.
Okay. So what I remember, Robert Glazner actually took me there one time, and I remember to get in, and I don't know what they did, but they would have these guys standing there, and they kind of would do this, and they were just waving people. They were in like their dress uniforms,
Yeah.
and they're just waving people in, right? And so that's what I recall about getting on a military base. And sure enough, that's what it's like when you get in.
Yeah.
Until September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
And it all changed. Why did I go off on that?
We were talking about. Well, you were about to tell me the 9/11 story, but I said you joined right before 9/11.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, that was then. So fast forward, I think you were talking about Jordan. Oh, deployments.
Yeah.
So I couldn't deploy.
Jordan.
And then I just ended up in a series of assignments that were non-deployable.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. So what they began to realize is that they were sending pilots to fly and sending pilots to do staff work. So now you got guys who are deploying multiple times, and some of them are doing jobs that any old Joe can do. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they began to realize that, they started giving opportunities for us to go.
Okay.
But now that I had been in multiple non-deployable positions. So I was at school. I was in just another job that I couldn't deploy in, and then
What does that mean? Top secret, classified,
and then I was in another one that I couldn't.
and
Deploy
another
in.
one classified.
And then I went to school again, right? And so now I get done with school, and they're like,
Oh,
"It's time." Now there's no. Do you want to?
yeah, yeah. So how was Jordan? Great experience, right? I mean, as far as like culturally, learning that culture, the Jordanians, right? I mean,
Yeah. So many stories.
so the one thing you told, I remember specifically talking about the tea. They always had tea.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have any discussion about business at all. They
Right.
wouldn't even like touch on it until they had their tea, right?
Yeah.
So strange.
Yeah.
Which I'm okay with that generally. Like I prefer doing this podcast in the mornings because I can get up here, usually have a cup of coffee with me. I'm sitting, we're kind of discussing, and suddenly next thing we know, I'm energized because I got my caffeine and we're in the middle of it. Boom, 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 boom. And whereas in the afternoon, you got that lunch in your stomach and you hadn't had any caffeine and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, I can see how, and through my leadership in my city, I've learned one of my strengths is just people, like being a people person. And I go in and my leaders have learned that of me. I go in there, I'm more of that Eastern deal because we'll talk for a few seconds about how's your family, what's going on with this for 5-10 minutes before we get into city business. And sometimes I'm like, okay, we don't need to do this, but I'm realizing they're adapting to who I am. Like they're respecting that I want to have a relationship with somebody before I'm discussing business with them. Interesting.
And you begin to realize that that's actually really important.
Yeah.
It's actually a very important thing.
Oh, and so now when we disagree with things, it's cool. It's okay. We're gonna move on from that.
Yeah.
And before you might like hold a grudge or be pissy about something, but now I can have any conversation I want and say just about anything I want to say, and we're gonna move. And whether I know I'm not gonna offend them, that's the best thing. I can flush out this whatever issue we're having, comment, opine, whatever, but that'll stay there, and then we'll go on to the next issue
Yeah.
because we know each other far beyond what that little subject was. Pretty cool.
Yeah. What's amazing too, though, is that is their culture, where at the same time they understand our culture.
Sure.
And so it's really interesting because, we are taught, before we go over there, like you got to have the tea.
They
But-
told you.
But so you go over there, and you start having the tea, and what you'll find actually is they end up trying to get to the point
Oh,
faster sometimes, and it
Yeah,
depends
yeah.
on the relationship because at the same time they understand. In fact, you've heard me talk about Colonel Muhammad,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
he was the host nation based commander, and it turned out that my primary role and probably my primary impact was the relationship I built with him, and he was a true diplomat. I mean, he
Yeah.
just a real ambassador, and he was a great guy. But he had spent time in Air War College, we were
Yeah.
talking about earlier, here in the States.
Hey, so that reminds me, I can't replicate it in any way, shape, or form, but I got to say, but that was one of the coolest things is reading those updates. I don't know how often you did them, weekly maybe?
About
Yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, that was an adventure in itself, being able to get those updates. But, as you learned new things, as you, like General Muhammad, who you had to deal with a lot. I said Colonel Muhammad, whatever.
he is general now. But
Is he?
He was a
Pretty-
colonel at the time. Yeah.
Learning these characters, learning how to interact with them, how that helps you. And then, anyway, the whole process was awesome. I went to Guatemala for my second trip last summer, and I had people donate to me going.
Okay.
And that went to me and to the cause of, we were mainly feeding centers that we had set up. But in order to thank those people more or less, and I kind of explained to some folks, this is what I wanted to do. I would take about 7 to 8 pictures and then comment and send it every night when I got back to my hotel. And there's about 25, 30 people that got that. And they were just like, same. I think I got that from when you did that. The update, at least when it's something unique like that. Some people do that daily, right? I guess it's like Facebook. Every morning you wake up and say how your day was. I don't do that, but some people do. But in those unique scenarios, so I appreciate you taking the time to do it. I imagine you kind of had fun doing it.
I absolutely did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something personal about it, right? Because at the same time, I'm out there without anybody.
Right. That's
Right.
a good point.
And I'm getting all these experiences experiences are great and they're better when they're shared. And so it was sort of a way of being able to, because you actually begin to realize that you're getting all these experience. In fact, man, I'll tell you, I got pretty darn emotional at one point when you begin to realize that there's this life-shaping moment that occurs. When I say moment, it was a 6-month period. And I almost want to pull up the picture I had with Colonel Muhammad. But when we were leaving, we took a picture and, I got pretty emotional. And the reason why is I realized I just, spent 6 months building a relationship with this guy. And that I would say, I hate sounding this bold and saying this, but I really felt like it had an impact not only on, world politics, but I really think it had an impact on world history.
Sure.
And you begin to realize that you're a part of this and you are a driver in some things that were occurring there. And I'm about to leave.
Yeah.
It's going to be all in the past.
It's over. Yeah.
Like this relationship I built with this guy, Colonel Muhammad, chances are I'm not going to ever see him again.
I end up quoting Ecclesiastes a lot on my podcast. I think I fell in love with the book. Stems from the verse in there. I think it's Ecclesiastes 5:12. It's the dreams of the laborer are sweet. Okay, and it's basically I saw it in Spanish on the bus I took when I was in Costa Rica to and from the school. The guy just had it on there. The dreams of the laborer are sweet. Mm-hmm. But it goes on saying, for the rich have too much abundance to whatever. Anyway, Ecclesiastes is a lot about you were gone. This is gone and the mountains were here and you will be long forgotten. A guy like Solomon who wrote it, we remember him because he wrote that book and it's lasted forever, but billions of others, people, families, you remember our Papa Miller, granddad's dad, right? Did you know his dad?
Nope.
Do you have any idea his name?
He might be an Indian, right?
Oh, that's the thing. Yeah, right. So we have
yeah.
And that's just right. That's right immediately there.
Yeah.
We have no idea who he is.
Yeah.
There's probably a gravestone somewhere that we could probably go find it. But anyway, you and that relationship, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's past. You're probably never going to see him again.
And it's one thing to realize. In fact, it was probably good that I realized it then, because it'd be terrible to realize it later.
Yeah.
But I just remember kind of sitting there in his office, and you're like, not only am I saying bye, taking a picture here, but I'm not going to, I had decided that was the end for me. I loved it. Check, done. I don't need to go camping anymore. Right. I've done it. I've enjoyed it. Right.
Wow.
It was really cool. And you're like, this is in the past. This is now in the past.
Yeah. Right. A thing of the past.
Yep.
Well, have you had any correspondence with him, by the way?
I shot him an email when I found he made general.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I haven't, mainly because I don't know what I would. All I had to do was take advantage of it, and I never did because I didn't know if I was crossing a line. But I could have gone and hanging out with his family and at his home. He had a get this, so he had a farm, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. You know what a farm is in Jordan?
No.
It's like an acre of dirt.
Oh, really?
But and that puts it in perspective,
because it's at desert.
It's desert.
So if you have dirt and you're especially an acre of it,
you're rich.
Yeah.
And so, he would be of the upper class, obviously. So that might not be obvious. It's a poor country.
Yeah.
It's a really poor country. And so here he is, like a high level military commander. And certainly there are some who are better off than him, but he's it would be in the upper class. And so, yeah, he would go to his farm. Anyway, he invited me and the other colonels a number of times to go hang out with he and his family. And I think if I had pushed on it, I think we would have gone.
Yeah. Well, that's tough. I find that sometimes now, I meet something or do business with somebody. I know we get along and have a good relationship, and you almost want to be like, man, why don't you come over? Hey, man, I'd like to go see your, that you're doing. But I'm real bad at that.
Well, and for us, we are fighting a war.
Yeah.
Right. So there are real, what we call operational security issues, and we have to make sure that we don't end up. I'm sorry.
Come on, bro. Is it?
That's going to keep going off. I don't
Is
know
it over there next to your water?
Yeah. I don't know how to turn it off.
Put it on vibrate, punk.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
There's a commercial out right now about people saying that. It turning your parent. This guy's job is to keep people from turning in their parents. And the phone goes off. She goes, now you turn on vibrate. And she's like, my phone didn't have vibrate. And he pulls up a picture and goes, it's right here on the left. Everybody, they're built in.
See, that's the thing is I can do it, but if I spend a lot of time on this, it'll take me just a minute. Do you want to do it?
Here. Oh,
By the way,
it's not an
iPhone.
It's not an iPhone. You went cheap on us. That's
did.
why.
Yeah, I had a tough time paying
Dang,
$1,000
bro.
for a phone. When I visited Aaron's school and talked to his kids up there, I actually asked one of the kids, "Hey, will you turn this on vibrate and make sure that it doesn't whatever?" Did you do it?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I just turned the volume all the way down to vibrate.
That works. So sometimes I do that, and it just means I can't hear somebody when they do call.
Yeah. Come on, bro.
Well, we could go all the way back to a point of departure a long time ago.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it was a cool experience.
yeah.
I think what got us off even on Jordan was the idea of how you interact with other cultures.
Yeah, and you're deploying.
Deploying.
Well, you getting deployed after 12 years in the military. I almost wanted to say it was almost my one-up was spending all my time in Costa Rica. Like it was almost my one-up to, not whatever, to you or whatever, and saying, I've spent time living with the Costa Rican family, learning a whole nother culture, right? Well, you just spent 6 months in Jordan culture, so you had to one-up me. Anyway.
Well, so for what it's worth, though, it's not I was on an American base,
Sure.
surrounded by Americans. I was probably one of the few people who ended up. It actually. So, how did I end up in even this role, though? It wasn't my role to be the primary interface with him.
Yeah.
But you may get an appreciation out of this. So there's a lot of rotations, right? And it's all about relationship. So I showed up, and then maybe a month or so later, the new vice commander showed up. He was a colonel. So I'm lieutenant colonel, he's a colonel. And it was his role to do actually it was the commander's role, but he always delegated it to the vice commander. So this guy shows up, and it's amazing what happens so there were some legitimate issues that we won't get into that needed to be resolved, right? So you experience it all the time in the city council. There's some little stuff there legitimate things that need to be resolved that can cause conflict.
Yeah.
So here you go. You got a new colonel that shows up, and he hasn't got to know. He hasn't had tea yet.
Yeah.
Guy. It's Ramadan, which means Colonel Muhammad doesn't eat or drink water during the day, right? So, there's a natural. What happens when you haven't eaten and drink water, right?
Irritable.
And so they weren't getting along, and eventually, Colonel Steinke, that was his name, he was like pulling his hair out, and I said, "Sir, would you mind if I took a shot at this?" And he goes, "Please do."
Nice.
And so I had full, authority, if you will, to just completely engage him.
Oh, good.
And it's one of those things where you're like, this is one of those things where I think it's important to once again know yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to sit there and go, so let's even back up. I'm an engineer who just got done with his, schooling for however many years.
Yep.
And I'm out now, where people are flying airplanes, turning wrenches on airplanes, people who their job has been to deploy and do their job all their life.
Yeah.
And now I'm just a staff officer who's way out of his element.
Yep.
And you're sitting there going, I don't, why am I here? Like, what value can I add?
Yep.
And then you see this thing and you go, well, it's not a job description. And no one's calling me to do it. And in fact, it's not even written down that somebody needs to do it. It's just, that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
And if I fail, there's no,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
So one of the things I remember, and I still get surprised by it now, that I learned from your emails is that we're at war. We don't think about that at all, day to day, never. I mean, it's like every now and then on a news blurb, they'll say, yeah, well, this 18-year war or whatever. And you're like, what? You know? And you being over there, sending those updates, I remember talking about how the planes loaded with bombs left full and came back empty every day.
Every day.
You know, and it's a little disheartening to think that we're literally at war and we don't think about it. We don't care. I mean, as Americans, I mean, and maybe we do for a little bit to make us feel like we're people who care, and then we don't anymore. You know what I mean? Like, in order to make ourselves feel like we care about what's going on, for a little bit we'll go, man, we're still at war. And then we forget of it and go on with our daily lives. It does say something about us being secure in our nation, and we're not going to be invaded. We're set up to where it's going to take a whole lot for you and I, well, me, to be in a war scenario. And you got to dive into that to find what's good and bad about it. But to be reminded, and I think it's important maybe that we should be constantly reminded that we are at war. We're dropping bombs daily still today. And I say, I don't know the exact, but.
One of the things I do remember is, when I was heading over, and I remember a friend actually telling me that the trip over is awesome. The trip back is horrible. Crap, I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, point is, we had to go into Kuwait, and then to get to Jordan, you had to wait for your next transport, and you never knew when it was going to come.
Yeah.
And so you're just kind of like, hanging out. Well, so then finally one morning we all round up, and let's just say it's 3 or 4 in the morning, something like that. And we all wake up, and remember, I've never been on a deployment before, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of guys. This is what they do. And that morning, see if you can think back this far, that morning was when President Trump launched cruise missiles into Syria.
Oh, okay.
And
wow, yeah, that was trying to time it all up. But yeah, Trump had become president around that time.
So that would have been April of 2017.
Yeah.
So let's say April 2nd, 3rd, 4th, something along those lines is when that day. And so there's a bunch of guys around, and I'd often heard that Jordan was the sweet deployment. Like
because you're deployed in the Middle East, but you're in an ally country with people who surrounded by people who like you, not hate you. Well, that's another debatable too. But
like you bring your body armor, but you never wear it. But if you're in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, you're wearing your body armor, you're carrying your weapon.
Yeah.
You're probably even carrying your chem bio gear, that kind of stuff. But for me, we just had to bring it.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we didn't wear it. And so it's funny because for the most part, I'm surrounded by guys who've been deployed all their life. And they're like, this is the life. Like I'm deploying. And it's, and I'm, and then these guys were like, crap, I thought this was going to be a sweet deployment. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
What's coming?
Yeah. And sure enough, we suited up, right?
Okay.
Because we don't know if the Syrians are what they're gonna do about that.
Yeah.
Of course, there's Syrians, there's the Russians. Like,
so you're okay. After we bombed Syria, it was like, oh crap, we got to suit up, we got to be ready. Okay.
I mean, you're always ready, but then when we attack them, which by the way was because of something to do with something they had done to their whatever, you just don't know what the retaliation is going to be.
Yeah.
And the easiest retaliation, would be a base like the one that we were at.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you just don't know, and you got to be prepared for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's the easiest retaliation. I get it.
Yeah, you can do a quick, easy retaliation, that sort of thing. And so, we were for about a week. We were in
On edge.
body armor, and carrying our Chem Bio, our masks and stuff like
Wow.
that around. That's not something I tell people about because it makes everybody scared. But
Yeah. Well, you come back home and we're still wearing masks. No kidding. Because years later, but we're not. But I'm not kidding.
we actually are. Because of the Chem Bio effect, right?
Chem Bio, made in a lab.
Right.
Well, cool, man. So I just think that's such a cool experience. The whole Jordan thing, and I know you can talk about it for hours. And I think we'll do some more of that. What about the move from Ohio to DC, back to Ohio? But you're in Florida now.
We're in Florida now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Florida's going really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What made you move to Florida?
You want the long version?
We're talking here.
So, I go off into the Air Force. Then at some point I get married. And it was never really my intention to stay in Ohio.
Yeah.
But, I married an Ohio girl.
Ohioan.
Ohioan. And
Sounds like a Native American name.
Ohioan.
Go ahead.
So anyway, we began to realize that, that Katie, Katie, she enjoys her home. This is where her family and friends are.
Me too.
Huh?
Me too.
Yeah. And I understand that. And for a guy who didn't really plan on living his life there, you began to kind of see the writing on the wall. And when we got back there the second time, even though military people move around and kids move around, for our kids, they were 2 and 1 when we moved there. So moved back. So this is the second time. So we ended up spending 6 years there. And so the kids, from let's just say 2 to 9, I think, that's where they met the neighbors,
Yeah.
got to really know the grandparents, the cousins, all that kind of stuff. Katie's from there. And so you really begin to realize that as much as I want to go somewhere else, at this point, maybe you could say it's becoming selfish, right? Like, how can you take everything that they know and say, hey,
take away from them.
Let's go do what I want. But it's one of those things where you knew it in your head that you were going to live your life in Ohio, but you just couldn't get there.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just being honest with yourself. You're trying to
Yeah.
be honest with yourself so you can begin to work through those things. And so it was years and years and years. But eventually, Katie and I started having the conversation about, okay, we're approaching retirement, where are we going to live? What do we want to do? And so we had a lot of those conversations. And
Military retirement.
military retirement, yeah. And that's an important distinction. I'm going to be retiring soon, but I'm not going to stop doing stuff.
Yeah.
That's it. We can talk about that some more later. So we had that conversation, and while Katie and I were talking about where we might want to go, I was sort of secretly working on how to stay in Ohio. And the reason why I didn't tell Katie is because I knew once I did that she would be all in. And I know that I needed to be not just okay with it, I had to be at peace,
Yeah.
right? It had to be okay. I didn't want it to seem as though, as soon as I told her, it would almost be wrong for me to tell her that and then not be okay with it. So I was secretly working a chance to stay in Ohio, get a final job there and that kind of thing. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger on it. And at some point, I'd say that I honestly came there. Just one of those ones where it's like I began to kind of envision our life there, envisioning the family and friends, just sort of envisioning all of it, and said, you know what? Not only it's no longer I'm not sure if I want to. I want this.
Yeah.
I'm embracing it. I am a man of faith, right? So back in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking that God's at work in different places. And
Sure.
hopefully I get to be a part of that, and that he has a mission or a ministry of some sort for me and for the family. And so I'm not going to try not to get in the way of that. So I finally came to that, and I brought it to Katie, it was funny about it. She was like, no.
Ah,
But that lasted about 2 or 3 days. And
Yeah.
because I think it was a shock to her when I said,
Yeah.
hey, let's stay here. And so we took about a week, and we were like, all right, let's do it. We're staying in Ohio. And so I put the plan in motion to stay there. And this was one of those ones where it's supposed to be 100% guaranteed. When I said this to this organization that I wanted to stay here and be with them, they're the snatchers who get to take whoever they want. And they said they would take me if all I just do is say yes. So when I said yes, they're like, all right, we'll get right back to you. Within 24 hours, I got back and said, Air Force won't let us take you.
whoa.
Right. So this is an organization that doesn't get told no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then the next thing is that in the meantime, before all this, I had been trying to work an assignment. This is I think it's funny. It may not be funny to you. I'm a big believer in working your assignments. It's supposed to be centralized, right? There's a central group that works assignments. So I use the Bro Network, and I start making phone calls. And Katie and I had talked about trying to get down to Eglin. They're in Florida, where we are right now. I think I went down about 4 different independent paths of different friends that I knew who were working at Eglin. Sent them my resume, said, hey, if you got a job, love to be down there. And I got it. Either we don't have a position, or hey, we'd love to have you, but it's just not the right timing.
Yeah.
So, that kind of stinks. But I tried everything I could. Now, when the Air Force comes around, they have this central system that says, here's all the ranks and engineers at all the bases. When that thing came out, so hear me, I just got done trying everything that there was for me to get down to Eglin, and I knew there was nothing there. When that thing came out, there were 16 positions for lieutenant colonel engineer throughout the entire
Oh, wow.
throughout the entire Air Force.
Yeah.
Right? Which is kind of weird because there's a lot more of us.
Yeah.
Than that. So why, I'll tell you later if you care to know, but it's boring. Point is that there were 16 positions. Of those 16 positions, 4 of them were at Eglin. I'm thinking, how is it that I tried to get down there by the Bro Network and they said I couldn't come, and now there's all these positions they won't let me.
Yeah.
I must
They
be
don't like you.
They don't like me.
They're not your bro.
They're not my bro. They're like, yeah, stay away. So anyway, so that's what came up. So we had wanted to go down there. And then I made this shift, and I said, no, we're gonna stay in Ohio. So within a week of us deciding, they had come back and said, no, you can't go. And so now Katie and I are twiddling our thumbs again. And I think as it turned out, one of those Bro Networks worked out. I didn't realize it. It was working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so I ended up at Eglin.
That's a lot of those planting those seeds, there's not like, oh yeah, come on down. No, it's like, let me go see. You got to talk to this guy, talk to that guy. Something's happening. I get it. So y'all moved to Florida, man. Closer to Texas?
It is. I would say that we typically drive about 17 hours from Ohio.
This is like, what, 12, 13?
12, 13.
And y'all just drove that 12, 13, right?
Yeah, we came in Saturday.
How was it? 5 hours better, right?
It was. In all the driving I've been doing, I've kind of learned that 17 is ridiculous. But 10 is good. I
Yeah.
enjoy 10. And 12 is kind of the limit. So
what are you doing at Eglin?
so there's an organization there called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. They are headquartered out of Fort Belvoir in Virginia.
Yeah.
And they have a small office at Eglin. And to describe the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, they do all things weapons of mass destruction.
Oh, wow.
So all the individual services, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, they have their mission sets. But
Coast Guard, bro, come on.
Coast Guard, they have their mission sets, and Space Force. They have their mission sets, but none of their mission sets prioritize weapons of mass destruction.
Wow.
And so this agency was set up to prioritize that to serve the individual services, right? So if a special forces unit goes into a place and runs into a chem weapon,
WMDs.
yeah, then they may not be prepared for that. So, they help us understand what their problems are. We help solve those problems so that they're prepared for them when they go.
And you're
into
pretty much like a 9 to 5 type thing, right? I mean,
say
it's
so.
a job.
It is. We're in the research and development arm of it.
Yeah.
So let's just say that a special forces team needs something. We try to be aware of the technology that's out there to try and potentially like modify, adjust a technology to meet some type of military
Yeah.
need, specifically as it relates to weapons of mass destruction or countering them.
Cool, man. So we went to lunch today, and you're an anti-masker. No, I'm kidding, sort of. But so why do you you felt you didn't? Did you not have a mask? You didn't want to wear a mask? You don't. You just weren't thinking about it. What do you think about? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. So first of all, one of the things that bothers me in this country as a whole is the division.
Yeah.
So I know you're joking.
Like masks.
Yeah,
You know, like we're divided
yeah,
about masks.
we are. And if anybody sits back and thinks about it, it's going to think that no matter how you feel about it, it's kind of odd that we find ourselves divided over.
Yeah.
So like, that's actually my understanding is that there's some elements of planning in that you divide the nation and
Sure.
pit them against each other and all these issues, and it goes well very in that. So I don't like it, not because I don't want to define somewhere, but because I think it puts us on the wrong track to try and divide us into,
Sure.
this belief versus that belief.
Oh man, I got so many friends that people I see and talk to on a regular basis and then some type of comment on the internet. I'm like, what? And I'm sure they think the same thing about me. I mean, I don't know anything specific, but you're like, what? Oh, this guy's, and suddenly we're like opinionated on and dividing each other on some type of deal. But when there's almost no one-on-one that I have a problem. You know what I mean? It's so strange how that works. Now, when people start taking their Facebook comments to your face, right? Maybe it's a little bit different situation. But it's interesting the way that works. And the reason I bring it up, one, to give you a hard time.
I'm happy with it. Yeah. I mean, bring
Yeah.
it.
But I guess the best claim is anti-masker. I mean, I still kind of am. I've given in because I want to go and eat at restaurants and shop and have an economy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I will abide by those rules.
Well, and for what it's worth, I mean, what do I say? So I am a leader in the Air Force, and even though I would have to get into a little bit about why I would choose not to wear a mask, but for the most part, I also have to tote a line just like you do, right? So there's nobody in my office who's watching this podcast, right? But I'm going to make the people in my office wear a mask, because it's the rules, and I'm going to wear one when I do so as well. So
are they wearing a mask at their desk?
Not by rule.
Yeah.
What anybody chooses to do, obviously, is up to them.
I think generally, right now, if you're moving around in a public space, and maybe not outside, but in interior or a public space, you'd be asked to wear a mask. And if you're sitting down at lunch, or if you're, but I mean, that's the main thing I guess I look at, especially being single. I eat out all the time, so if you're sitting down at a restaurant table, you don't have to have a mask on. But like at Don Juan's, I get up and walk to go get a fork. I got to put my mask on, go get the fork, and right back. So at that point, I'm doing it to appease others, right? Like, and being an individual who is healthy and is so far, but I mean, pre-COVID as well, not affected by flu virus type issues. Every time I wear a mask, I'm doing it for other people. What kind of sucks about that, in my opinion, is I'm often doing it for the feelings of another person. When I'm doing it for another person, I'd like to think I'm doing it so that they don't catch me as an asymptomatic, air quotes, carrier of a virus. This particular virus, I mean, do I have the regular flu asymptomatic? Do I carry the regular flu every year and just not have symptoms? Or do I just carry, this year I might carry COVID-19? asymptomatic and not have, you see what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's the biggest issue. This subject is so diverse, but it is because we shut down our entire country for 2 months and are mandating breathing apparatuses on people, and so it's worth putting the 2 cents on now. I know folks that'll call me an idiot for not wearing a mask. I mean, just, what am I, stupid? Do you not know science? And then I'll have people say that I'm a sheep for wearing a mask. You know what I mean? So whatever. I've learned in my position, particularly now, more and more, I'm not worried about what other people think of me. And actually, that's beneficial to Cole Humphreys as a person. Like, I've gotten better at not worrying about what people think of me, even in that leadership position. Like, I want to be neutral. I want to have everybody involved in my decisions. Everybody needs to be involved in my decisions. I'm sorry, everybody's input needs to be involved in my decisions. I don't need to be one way. That's when you go Republican, Democrat, and you don't care about the other side because you want your side. I'd rather make decisions with both sides' input. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm ready for it to be over. I'm tired of, I'm in the habit now. I've got it in my pocket. Of course, they're probably dirty. So now I got to worry about, am I wearing dirty masks? I mean, is my stanky breath from yesterday going to be on my mask today? And do I need to buy a whole bunch of them? Whatever, and
I think some of the real challenge that I have here is that it floors me that we're mad at each other over masks.
Yeah.
It really, it's amazing. Well,
here's quickly, and both sides, well, I think wearing a mask is mandated in public places right now. It is, somebody is telling you have to put on a mask. Okay, so there's your first problem. You're telling, regardless of the situation and the reason for, you're telling somebody that they have to put on an apparatus to be in a public space. So there's some rights issues there, right? And then you got the other side who's fearful of contracting a disease or virus that you're disheartening. Just you care about nobody except yourself if you're not wearing a mask. So you got different origins of the anger.
Yeah.
And
and I think part of the challenge is, and this is a longer time to talk about, but that just fundamentally, we are making decisions based on fear, panic, and lies.
Sure.
And so do you
think that's post lockdown? I mean, during the lockdown, we were just trying to figure everything out.
Right.
And now we know a lot more about it, and we're still making those decisions off fear and panic. And
absolutely. That's I think we were talking earlier about how my challenge with it is that the goalposts moved.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that, from the beginning, I tend to be like, hey, chill out, it's not that big of a deal. But I can admit that when the disease was coming, that we didn't know, right? There was no data. And what if this is, what if Ebola is coming and, our skin's going to be melting
flesh
off?
eating.
Yeah.
That's what I think of, flesh eating bacteria.
And I don't, nobody wants to be wrong with that. So anybody can sit back and say, all right, like, it's going to be kind of painful, but we can hang out for 2 or 3 weeks in our house and see how things go. But, and if I remember right, the problem wasn't the idea about whether or not there would be a spread of the disease. Like, that was going to happen.
Yeah.
The idea was supposed to be that it was going to be so massive and so quick that the hospitals would be overrun and you wouldn't be able to care for the people.
Yeah.
And so it was the whole flatten the curve thing. And as far as I know, we did that, or it was never an issue, whatever it was. The bottom line is hospitals were definitely never overrun.
Right. So the curve was flattened. Now you may argue, like we talked about, well, the cases were going up. The cases were going up, but the large majority of those cases were people who had very light symptoms, like a cold, who don't need to go to the emergency room. Now, yes, more, especially in the populous areas, more rooms were needed and more equipment was needed, right? But not to the capacity.
Yeah,
limit.
the hospitals didn't get to their capacities, and I don't have data here, so I'm not going to say, but you got to remember there were a lot of people who didn't go to the hospital during the time that everything was shut down,
yeah.
and now a whole bunch of people are starting to go to the hospital because they're
Yeah.
getting out, getting sick. They just spent 2 months not getting their normal like bacterias that come into you
Yeah.
that your immune system grows up against, and even then you're not overrunning the hospitals. So the thing is, what I'm getting at here is that we were supposed to kind of hunker down, let the curve flatten, and then get out and do society like we normally do. Diseases come, they go, people die. Unfortunately, like it's
And
been a
that's
part of
where
our
the
history.
herd immunity comes from, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
your kid who get maybe a little cough and that's it, and now they're immune to it. Not immune, but now they've had it. Their body's experienced it. I will say, and this is got to kind of travel this the right way. So those people who didn't go to the hospital before, now that have more room, people are going to the hospital. They don't necessarily need to go to the hospital. Now, the hospital encourages it because they give out a lot of free health care. So now when somebody shows up and has COVID, they're getting government money to take care of that. Whereas before they had, like, anytime a hospital can get money, it's beneficial to everybody, especially the hospital, people who own the hospital. So they're like, yeah, come on in, because they're getting money. And it's not just like, oh, okay, yeah, but they're spending that money. But that's the thing, they treat so many people. It's like when you have insurance, they charge you for everything, right? Because they're giving the other lady who didn't have insurance more or less free health care, right? So they're treating one person who doesn't have insurance, and they're treating the next person that does have insurance. So they have to charge extra to the insurance. Not that that's okay, but that's one of the reasons that when the COVID-19 folks come in, they're like, yeah, come on, you're COVID, everybody's COVID, and they're able to collect.
And if you come into the hospital for any reason, you're being tested for it. And then if you test positive, whether you have symptoms from it or not, or whether you showed up there for not, you're going to the special isolation area.
Yeah.
Right. And so now that area is overrun because they're putting people there who may have had the disease but shown us. Anyway, but I'm also giving generalizations, right? It's not the same thing happening in every hospital throughout. I mean, we're a vast country, different things, COVID or not related, or attributing to all these things. And so here's what I find amazing is that, so they shut us all down, and I say they being just leadership in general, whose job is to protect, doesn't want to be liable for whatever thing's going to go on, wants to do, quote, the right thing. So they shut down. And then it becomes into, well, okay, we can open back up, but the only way you're going to open back up is you wear a mask. Well, so now it's like you've been coerced, right? You're a small business. I feel terrible for the small businesses, right?
Oh, man.
Because they're the little guy. They're not Target. They're not, the big box stores and stuff like that. And now they're coerced. Now, some of them may want to, or they want to, great. But some of them are being forced to do these things under the idea that, well, if I don't do it, then I can't reopen. It's like, come on. So all of it to me kind of comes into this, like, we were supposed to have just sort of like calmed down while we flatten the curve, and then we were going to go back out and face the world, right? And face potential consequences. I would argue that it's not as bad as everybody thought it was going to be, maybe even in past seasons. But even if that's not the case, like, we've done significant harm, and I would argue significantly more harm than the disease ever would have caused.
Right, I agree.
By doing all this, and yet we're still finding ourselves arguing over masks. Yeah.
So I'd argue that from the phased opening to the masks, I think was important, because there were so many, me, myself included, that I don't need the mask. And you know what? I still kind of believe that. But I saw the decrease in cases from when we mandated masks, right? So wearing masks had an effect on the amount of cases and the amount of the way the virus spread. But so I would say that, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, after the quarantine, we were kind of open. We did open up, but now we're back to masks mandated. Well, now that we've kind of forced masks and had some of those who might be used to wearing a mask. Okay, here's a good question. We don't mandate masks anymore. Are you not having your employees wear masks? Are they wearing masks tomorrow?
You saying if suddenly,
Yeah.
So
government entities, large corporations, your office, today we don't have to wear masks anymore. Are they wearing them tomorrow?
So I have to follow my leadership's guidance.
Yeah.
Right. So if my leadership says we have to, then we are. If not, then no.
So your masks are no longer oriented. So you think some of the guys may still wear it?
They might.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is that if you want to wear a mask, you're free to. The hard thing is if you're not wanting to wear a mask, you're not free to. And you know
that's interesting.
Masks carry their own set of problems, right?
Yeah.
Their own set of issues. Anywhere from I know some people, I won't mention names, who literally they panic attacks.
Sure.
Right.
Claustrophobic. I'm
Yeah.
claustrophobic.
And we should be at least aware of that. It's not people just not
Being
wanting to do
anti-masker,
it.
yeah.
Like there are real challenges. Yeah. So unscientific study.
Yeah.
Right. But go get a carbon dioxide reader
Yeah.
and stick it up under your mask, and it won't even be able to read the amount of carbon dioxide that's being trapped in your mask, which is way above OSHA standards. Vice also the oxygen piece,
Yeah.
that you won't have enough oxygen. Your oxygen levels will be well below what OSHA stands. Anyway, point is that
Well, I don't buy that. What I buy is if I sneeze or cough or breathe out anything, very small particles, including that particle, may get through. But the majority of them is going to go back and down on my throat, not on you.
Yeah.
So if I have COVID and I'm speaking to you, this is coming out constantly, right? If I have a mask, some may still come out, right? But majority of it's getting shot back onto the sides and open. And for somebody not to understand that, I don't know if I'm seeing something the wrong way or what, but it significantly reduces the amount of crap I'm throwing onto you.
So, but the standard then at that point is that we all wear masks all the time for any reason, because we're all going to be carrying some type of virus or disease all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I feel like we're
agree.
getting into silly arguments, but
No,
I can better deflect, right?
Yeah.
Like this than the mask going like, but I don't want to me, there's a lot more fundamental things. And you mentioned science earlier, and I think everybody would agree that there's a difference between it going out like this versus out and all this kind of stuff. What few actual studies I've seen on these have shown that they have no effect.
The mask.
Yeah, there's no statistical difference between mask and no mask when looked at as a society as a whole.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those studies are available, and some of them were done over a very, very long period of time.
Yeah.
Over the flu, right? There was no COVID to test on, but so not that I haven't done an exhaustive study on this, right? But I haven't seen any. So people say it makes sense that they help.
Yeah.
Fair.
That's what I said.
But
I didn't say.
But science, when we always talk about, well, we're going to go with the science, right? Well, the science doesn't say that. The science says it's statistically no different.
So if you're active, I'm active symptoms with COVID, with the flu right now. I mean, I'm sneezing, I'm coughing, and we're sitting next to each other. Would you rather me have a mask or rather me not have a mask?
I'd rather you just be cognizant of the fact that you have something and try not to give it to me.
Sure. But I'm probably not. I'm probably going to be talking and coughing, and you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
And that's where I think that's the difference is like, it's clearly if one person's sick and then the other person's not, and they're standing next to each other talking, he's going to contract disease to the other person.
Yeah.
With the mask, you significantly reduce that. And so I'm not saying that, whoa, what was that?
I just coughed. I don't know.
Oh, dude.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's on my desk. Oh, my gosh. What are you doing? All my future guests are going to get sick.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry. Would have been better if I'd had a mask on.
I was having a COVID reaction to your. So, by the way, you said argument, and we're not raising our voice or anything, but like this discussion is important.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to hear it and go down that route. And they can opinionate on it all they want, but people like me have these thoughts. People like you have those thoughts, and they intermingle as well. And so to get the reasoning behind those thoughts and the reasoning behind each other improves, one, you and I's thought process, and two, other people who may be listening to it. Also, the education, like we both agree on the herd immunity, the building of your immune system, in the sense that, one, contracting disease, contracting the virus, and allowing your body to fight it off by balancing your body. Like, I'm never more healthy when I'm sick, right? Because I drink a lot of water. I don't drink Coke, which I drink all the time. I don't drink my desserts. I cut sugar out. I drink all the water. I got my little oils that help balance my body out. You know, you suddenly, now your body is focused on fighting this virus as opposed to a snotty nose, fighting off all the sugar you took for lunch that day, or whatever it may be. And so now you have a strong immune system for any future issues you may have. And so of what I want people to get out of COVID-19 is build your immune system.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's nothing more important than trying to live a healthy lifestyle. We'll prescribe vaccines, we'll prescribe painkillers, but doctors won't prescribe a healthy diet. You know what? They do. I don't take that argument. They do prescribe healthy diets, but people don't. It's easier to pop the pill. It's easier to take the antibiotics. So I hope that people learn that it's important to build your immune system, because, like you said, this isn't a skin rotting disease. This isn't flesh eating. This is the flu.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, I mean, it's not as though I want to catch it.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I'm not.
You're not like,
I don't want to catch the cold or the flu or anything else. And I'm not even trying to make a comparison to being the flu. It's just that, man, I mean, we're living in fear and panic, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
That
that's a bad way to live. I mean,
it is.
And a lot of people do that way, and they're very unhealthy.
And I mean, this is, I don't know, I'll toss this out there, but, you know, in prisons, you know, they have these sort of solitary confinement things, right?
Yeah.
Where let's just say for bad behavior, someone has to go spend time in a hole. But there are rules associated with that because of someone's mental ability, right? To get some sunshine, to get some type of, you know,
an hour a day in the yard,
exposure, whatever you may call it. I mean, we just took like normal people and we told them to stay at home for like 2 months.
Yeah.
They couldn't go outside, and then we put on, like, all they have is TV. Right.
Yeah.
And it's 24/7
Fear.
Yeah. That, you know, that affects you.
Oh.
Now, I turned off the TV. I haven't watched TV in a long time. I actually have gotten to where I can look at the headlines and I can see, sorry, my opinion, the ill logic in the headlines where it's just sensationalism. And so I've gotten to where I don't watch it because, well, I won't get into examples, but bottom line is I can quickly scan through it and go, there's nothing. Oh, there's something there. Let me read about that.
Yeah.
And now you can kind of go, and even sometimes then I get to the bottom and go,
what?
That's not what your headline said.
It's nothing to do with the headline.
Right. And so, but so now it's typical that someone's going to, the average person, and I don't mean that in a negative way, is at home. They need that physical, mental, social interaction. They're not getting it. The only thing you have is a TV. That you're going to naturally turn on the news. When you do that, that news is going to be fear, panic, sensationalism. And so all you're getting, I heard somebody one time call it fear porn, right? Like just like, but it's attractive, it's addictive, and you want more of it.
It absolutely is.
And it causes this. And so I find it odd that people are fighting over masks.
Yeah.
It's very odd to me. So it's not that I don't want to or I'm not willing to. There's a part of me that wants to be able to have an honest conversation with someone who cares about this, because it just doesn't, no one's saying you can't wear a mask. It's just, man, why are we
fighting over it?
Yeah.
Well, that's the way people are, and that ship has sailed, in my opinion. I mean, I can attempt to be I keep saying anti-masker, but what I mean by that is like, look, guys, this isn't needed. I mean, we need to move on from this. Every time we wear a mask, we're prolonging how long this is going to be. But now I'm the guy that wants my grandpa to die because, you know what I mean? Because I don't wear a mask. You know, that's what I'm correlated with.
Yeah.
So it's tough. I'm glad we're able to touch on it. I hope, I hope it helps somebody. I think we're going over an hour now, so I'm pretty good. Thanks a lot. Safe travels. I know you'll hang out with you this week. I think hopefully a few folks that you know watch the podcast just because they don't get to hear.
Depends
from
on
you
what I
that much.
said.
Yeah, they're gonna hate you. You just split your friendship. Like you went from like this many to this many friends, and I don't even know which side. I think I don't even know. That's the point.
Well,
It's like
I mentioned I was a little bit afraid about coming on, but part of it was like I'm still active duty. You know, it's like let's make sure I get my pension
you're
before.
you're decommissioned.
Yeah.
Dishonorable
Right.
discharge.
I'm depending on that pension here in a little while. Let's. All
Yeah. All right, man. We'll see you.
right.
Woo!